Oh, it's been a full year since I last talked about this show, and to be perfectly honest, after the year I had, which was this year, with so many cartoons and shows being left out of review due to me being burned out and bad things happening during this year, mainly the Discovery situation, I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. I really tried. I really tried to make this year as good as possible, even if it would never top last year's schedules. But when it came to Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends and people really wanted me to review more episodes from this show, I'm just gonna say it right now. Just turn off your clocks because it's difficult to get back into this show with the negative aspects centering around it. It's one thing to review negativity from this show, but when it came to positivity, that didn't last long since I only reviewed 2 good episodes after Imagination Destination. And for me personally, the more I think about it over the past year, the positive attributes from this show do not overweigh the negatives completely, to the point that after watching The Loud House, this and The Loud House are officially best friends when it comes to their negativity. And since I've been planning on reviewing this episode for quite some time, I'm just gonna say this right now. Goodbye to Bloo is a huge lackluster and an overrated finale I've seen from any other cartoon, which is saying a lot after rewatching this episode. Bloo had been waiting for Mac to come over an hour, and when he received the news from Mr. Helmet that he's gonna be moving, it concerns him to the point that he wants to spend the entire day with Mac completely. In the following day, Bloo tries his hardest to hang out with Mac before he moves, but Mac has different plans upon his final visit to Foster's. You know, when people say that Destination Imagination show up in the finale, then they're totally right, because as much as that you can't be able to top what you did in that film, it doesn't excuse the poorly made writing in this episode. Because to be perfectly honest, if you're going to have an episode that takes you back to previous episodes when it comes to callbacks, don't make the ending really lackluster in order to tease your audience. Because I'm pretty sure for anyone who watched this final episode back in 2009, we're probably at a time where they didn't enjoy Cartoon Network due to the live action situations, the fact that the cartoons have a dip in quality, and this was a year before Adventure Time and regular show aired. Look, I need to address the callbacks, because they're mostly for diehard Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends fans, but when it comes to a finale that needs to be aged over time, then it doesn't work when the ending just instantly makes everything completely difficult to enjoy. The callbacks for me personally was just basically just showing you, hey, remember this, and remember this. That's just basically what I've seen throughout this entire episode. And the thing is, even if those episodes were mostly good, it doesn't change the fact that this finale just really hammers in on you want to remember the old episodes when this show finally ends. But at the same time, it really feels like it's just desperation. It may not back in 2009, but after 13 years later, then I don't even think that this is really good material when it comes to finale, at least in my perspective. Not to mention that there was a lot, and I do mean a lot of teasing when it comes to Mac having a crush towards Frankie, and to be perfectly honest, the fact that Frankie never told Mac once about that she's too old for him really goes to show that they just put little to no effort when it comes to age gaps in this show. Am I literally the only one who thinks that this show should teach kids a lesson about age gaps instead of Adventure Time? I mean, I understand that age gaps are mostly important, especially in Adventure Time, but considering that this is honestly the episode that had a chance to talk about age gaps, it's difficult to see Frankie mostly being okay with Mac having a crush on her, especially to the point that he takes him out on a date. I wish what I said was mostly in the of exaggeration, but to be perfectly honest, the fact that the focus in this show is just non-existent at times, I don't even understand how that this show managed to surpass any controversial when it comes to topics like this. I mean, yes, they didn't go too physical, but at the same time, it's just really confusing to think that no one, when it comes to critics, questions most of the ideas that they did in this show. Here's the thing. I really felt like that the moments of Mac hanging out with the other imaginary friends is good to the point that you can tell that he really wants to say goodbye, but considering that this isn't the goodbye that any other imaginary friend were expecting, including Bloo, it just really makes the majority of this episode feel feel more of a ordinary episode than a finale in general. The fact that this show started off with a good premiere, not to mention that it was also a film, goes to show that there was passion when it started all, with Bloo being transported to Foster's while Mac has the goal to head back to Foster's after school. So the fact that this episode ends with a really lackluster finale to the show is honestly disappointing. And to be perfectly honest, the majority of this episode is fine, but the ending is what really damages the entire episode. Not to mention making it completely pointless of Bloo being concerned that Mac is actually moving, which he is not. As it turns out, Mac isn't moving away. Her mother got a promotion involving a job, which means that they need to move into a different apartment. That's basically it. So apparently this entire time, Bloo has been overreacting, along with the imaginary friends being mostly duped. But at the same time, whenever I say duped, it doesn't even feel like that they've been fooled. It's just a misunderstanding that is just portrayed really, really badly. If Mac is willing to say honest things to Bloo, then why couldn't he just say that when he got to Foster's during this episode? I just don't understand it. It will prevent nearly everything. In fact, it just makes the majority of this episode mostly worthless so that Bloo won't be paranoid and we won't be able to have moments of having callbacks. But to be honest, do you really think that Callbacks really makes this episode good? Because the ending will probably revolt all those callbacks. Which leads to probably the biggest reason onto why we have these callbacks. I know I've stated because of nostalgia purposes, but the reason why is because they want to make Luke incredibly likable instead of unlikable, but at the same time, I don't think that Bloo doesn't deserve any of this. Like, in the Pranks for Nothing episode, you can relate to Bloo regardless if he did some terrible things involving hotel stuff that he wasn't supposed to do because he was so over the top with hot cocoa or coffee. But in this episode, he isn't high off of coffee whatsoever. He just wants to give Mac the best day ever, which is supposed to be memorable before he moves. But considering that he doesn't move, it really means that everything that Bloo went through was literally all for nothing. And the fact that Mac didn't tell him about this when he got to Foster's, then how is any of this considered good, not to mention the fact that it works for a finale? Like, out of all the finales I've seen, especially the shows that aren't to be taken seriously, this show would have had a better finale if Mac actually moved, which means that lives would have been a lot more differently. And the fact that this show were serious at times, this would have been the opportunity that they could have took the goodbye between Mac and Bloo, along with the other characters, a lot more legitimately. And to be honest, the fact that no one has an actual reaction of Mac just saying that they're just moving to a different apartment, then this is where it leads to Loud House's flannerization levels. And to be perfectly honest with you, the fact that I stated that Foster's and the Loud House are best friends when it comes to materials like this, you know that's not a good thing. Granted, the only reaction we ended up getting, which is actually humorous for a bit, is that Louise, who owns Cheese, can't be able to have her imaginary friend because when they move to a different apartment, they're dealing with a no pets or imaginary friends policy, which means that Cheese has to move into Foster's. And everyone screams in fear, with Wilt saying, "I'm sorry, but that is not okay." But Cheese gets the last line that he says, "Okay, bye, doggies." You know, if we ended up getting a 7th season from this show and the people are trying way too hard in Foster's to get rid of Cheese, I'm just gonna predict that it will be the same result as the Big Cheese. Knowing forward that they're dealing with a situation with Cheese in the building rather than just getting rid of him, similar to the Big Cheese, then I'm pretty sure that Mr. Hellman's techniques of just getting rid of Cheese would have been the same thing as getting rid of Bloo, since that even though that he promised to Mac to keep Bloo at Foster's when it comes to Mac coming over for every day, it's difficult to relate the characters when they're supposed to be completely strict and different from the likable characters. Like, it's one thing that Mr. Hellman does make mistakes from time to time, but the way that he's executed in this episode, all the while thinking about of many different opportunities to get rid of Cheese, then what else do I need to cite in this show? If anything, all it is that this is just basically the Loud House before the Loud House became a thing on Nickelodeon. I'm gonna be honest with you, people would probably see this show as the Loud House, while the Loud House is mostly Foster's, where you could probably see the Loud Sisters as the imaginary friends, while Lincoln is mostly Mac and Bloo when it comes to how they're portrayed of being likable but sometimes hateable for the character development reasons. Look, when this finale premiered back in 2009, I can guarantee you that it was really good, but at the same time, it was at the time in 2009. Before shows like Adventure Time, a regular show, The Amazing World of Gumball, among others, have taken over Cartoon Network in the 2010s. And to be perfectly honest, in the late 2000s, this really felt like that after this show came to an end, nothing saved Cartoon Network at that time. Due to live action material, among with so many bad decisions to the point that it's just difficult to take Cartoon Network seriously at that time. And when it comes to this show ending, I can only say that the positive of this finale is that it went off on a good note back in 2009, but as of now, especially during the 2020s, it's not really a good idea to say that this has a better send-off when it comes to other cartoons that did better send-offs. Though then again, every show needs to have an ending no matter what, but considering that this show had that ending, and I will admit that the credit sequences is actually really good, it doesn't excuse the episode itself since that it could have been a much more better. Like, even if I would give this show the benefit of the doubt, if it had more seasons, I'm pretty sure it will probably flanderize the characters a lot more, and it will probably reach to levels of flanderization that it would probably be difficult to find any enjoyment from the show, especially when they're gonna be making horrible episodes possibly even worse than before. Okay, granted, not as worse as the Imposters or Everyone Knows It's Bendy episodes, but at the same time, knowing that Season 6 did had bad episodes, there's no escaping if there was going to be a Season 7. Look, I understand that I've said that I don't want to review any more bad episodes last year, which I only ended up reviewing 2 good episodes after Destination Imagination, but the thing is, when I was burned out, I couldn't be able to stand finding the good qualities in cartoons like Foster's. Like, I like the show, but I'm not a huge fan of the show, and I understand that some of my videos involving Foster's have reached 1,000 views. That doesn't automatically mean that I'm a Foster's critic. I'm a critic of shows that I actually enjoyed, even if they do not get the most attention. To be honest, one of the reasons why I want to review this episode isn't because that this is going to be my final episode review involving Foster's. It's the fact that I want to get my perspective out of the finale of how I feel and the fact that people say that it was completely unsatisfying. And as much as that some people may enjoy this finale despite the bigger flaws, keep in mind, I honestly felt like that the callbacks just didn't work out for this episode, for how the ending just completely makes the entire episode worthless. That's just what I see involving this episode in particular, for it being the finale of a show that is supposed to be one of the best cartoons in Cartoon Network in the 2000s. And if anyone, and I do mean anyone, wants me to do a month dedicated to episode reviews from this show, don't get your hopes up, because it's never going to happen. You see, when I did We Bear Bears Month, Equestria Girls Month, My Little Pony Months and Marathons, there was passion behind those projects. Granted, I really didn't enjoy those episodes like I used to, but at the same time, they were at a prime where I was enjoying them, even if when they came to an end or they were still running new episodes. When it comes to this show, I do like it, but I do not have a passion involving the episodes I wanted to review from this show. Because even though maybe a few, it doesn't change the fact that the negativity just spreads everywhere involving the positivity from this show. And I did plan on doing the Foster's Month last year, but considering that I shorted it down to a week of 5 episode reviews, it's honestly enough for you guys. Granted, I know you wanted more, but the thing is, I pretty much reviewed about 20 or more episodes from this show. And after thinking about it from time to time, if I did review this episode last year, I would have seen this as a really good episode to wrap up the series. If I binge watched the episodes for preparation for review of a Foster's Month. But since I didn't, and it took a full year to finally get back to this show, all I can say is that I can't really say that doing the month involving Foster's is a good idea, especially after watching this episode. I watch the episodes involving Foster's during my free time, and yet at the same time, if I did have the ability to review those episodes, I'm pretty sure that when time goes on, all I can think of is that this finale just sums up the entire show as lackluster when it comes to negativity overweighing the positives. Because if the positives are difficult to find any enjoyment out of due to this finale, you know that's an issue involving Foster's. I know I ramble on and on in my videos, and the reason why I did it in this again is because I need to express my opinions, especially the people who wanted me to review more episodes involving Foster's. So to be perfectly honest, when it comes to the following year involving Cartoon Crisis 3, yes, I am going to be reviewing another bad episode from this show. Though to be perfectly honest, reviewing another good episode from this show isn't going to mean anything, considering I've already reviewed the Halloween episode, the Christmas episode, and the Valentine's Day episode. Though in all seriousness, do not expect me to review another episode from this show anytime soon. Just keep in mind, when it comes to reviewing a bad episode for Cartoon Crisis 3, it's either going to be an episode by request or an episode from my choosing, because to be perfectly honest, I reviewed a lot of bad episodes from this show that I'm going to have to start searching again in order to find the episode that actually works for me, because there are a lot of different episodes that it's difficult to think of which one is the perfect one. Granted, it could be that Cartoon Crisis may have 30 videos or more, but at the same time, if I'm ever going to review another episode from this show, then I'm probably going to take a request from you guys. With that being said, I'm giving Goodbye to Blue a 4 out of 10.